Hey everybody, before we get started, this is Jason and I wanted to highlight a really great resource. It is a project that's happening on the One Player Guild right now, and as opposed to me blathering on about it, I have invited on the curator of the top 100 People's Choice solo game voting that is happening right now. And joining me is Kevin Erskine. Hey Kevin.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, so you were on the show last year. If you wanted to take a look at our take on the 2016 list, that those podcasts are available on our feed. But tell the people what the list is all about and encourage them to go vote.
All right. Well, we see other people do top 100 lists, and we figured in the solo gaming world, the games we like are different than the general ones a lot of times. So we decided to put this thing together. It's pretty simple. If you go on to the Board Game Geek, you can see in the One Player Guild, you'll see a post about this. You just got to send me your top 20 games and that you play solo, and we go and compile them all and put them all together and put out the list. You have till the end of November to vote, and we put out the list. We show the results 10 at a time starting in December. And if you don't have 20, we take as few as 5. We don't want people voting for just one game, but we'll take as few as 5 and just rank them from 1 to 5, 1 to 20, and that's all there is to it.
And so we definitely want to promote this list. We want to encourage people to go to the One Player Guild, to hit up Kevin Erskine, which is Kerskine. Shoot him an email with your top 20 games. This list, when it's together, it is the single best resource for solo gamers, especially for new gamers. 10,000 people in the Facebook group, a lot of new gamers wondering, what should I get? What should I get? Bam, here's 100 games. Here are some card games. Here are some war games. Here are some adventure games. Here's a whole cross-section of the best of the best. So go vote. We will have Kevin back on in December when the list is done. We will have a big commentary episode just like we did last year. So that's it. On with the show. Every Night is Game Night, episode 59, Near and Far and the Amber Mines expansion with the designer, Ryan Lockett. Yo, my peoples, what's up? This is Jason, and you are at the Every Night is Game Night podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. So a couple of programming notes before we get started. Number one, because we are talking about Near and Far and the Amber Mines expansion, it is currently on Kickstarter, and we wanted to get this episode out a little bit early, so you're going to see this in your feed, not on our usual Friday, but a little bit earlier. The second programming note is that for the next few episodes, we are going to be Sans Anthony. Fortunately, a little bit of work stuff is happening, getting ready for PAX, and he also has his podcast over at BoardGamersAnonymous.com. Please check that out if you want to hear his continuing coverage of games. But I'm here, and rather than do this myself, I have called upon some help from the solo gaming community, from the game reviewer community, and some people have answered the call. So first, we have from the Portal Gaming Podcast, The Brandt.
Hello, everybody. How you doing out there? Glad to be here. Thanks, Jason, for asking me. I'm excited to talk some Near and Far and talk to Ryan Lockett today.
And we have Ryan Lockett. Welcome to the show, Ryan.
Thank you.
All right.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, cool. So we're you are in Utah right now, and you just came back from vacation. So yeah, thank you for making the time. Appreciate it.
Yeah, this is great. I'm excited.
Cool. So first of all, we wanted to have the audience get to know a little bit about you. Anybody who knows games knows that Ryan Lockett is that guy. So, in the sense of the guy who does his own designing, his own publishing, his own art, his own graphic design, Red Raven Games is Ryan Lockett. So, maybe, actually, you had a better way to phrase that question, Brandt.
Yeah, no, I was just interested because, Ryan, you have a very unique art style, and your games even have a unique feel to them. I played a bunch of them, and they're not even all alike each other. And then, to find out you do publishing and all these other things. So what gave you that final inspiration to just say, you know what, I'm going to do it all?
Well, That's actually great to hear that you say that the games are different, because sometimes I get the comment that they're similar, and I think that's true of some of them, but if you've played a lot of them, then there are a few in there that are pretty different. So, but yeah, I mean, I've always been obsessed with game design, even as a kid. Like 11, 12 years old, I was designing games, and I was drawing, I was doing the art for them. And it's just been a hobby ever since, until I could make it a career. So, and publishing was the way to do it. I tried to pitch my games to other publishers, but that just didn't seem like a good way to make it a career. So,
Nice. So you're like, all right, I'm just going to do it myself.
Yeah, and for a while I was trying to be a freelance artist for in the gaming industry, and that wasn't paying the bills either. So I kind of left that behind too. But I have done, before I started Red Raven, I did illustrations for Rio Grande Games and Z-Man Games and a few other publishers.
And not only are you doing all this stuff in the gaming sphere, I hear from the grapevine that you're also a man of many talents. Like you're into juggling and some musician stuff. Is that true?
Yeah, I like to juggle, and I was going to college. I wanted to be a professional musician before I jumped into the game thing. So that didn't work out. But I come from a very musically minded family.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You make me feel very lazy.
What do you play or sing or write, or what do you do for music?
Yeah, I sing, and I play trumpet.
Nice.
Yeah, my dad and my mom and dad, they both play saxophone, and they actually have a company that manufactures musical instruments. So spent a lot of time doing that.
Awesome, man. So I can hear the audience is saying, get on with the game. So cool. But I wanted to set the scene so we're talking about Near and Far. And I wanted to set the scene. First of all, Near and Far is not a solo game out of the box. A lot of our audience listens for solo games. There are a couple of adjustments that you can make. I will talk about a fan-made solo a little bit later. And the new Kickstarter, which is Amber Minds, does have co-op and solo. We're going to get into that a little bit too. I'm pretty excited about that. But before we get into all that, I wanted to talk about Near and Far, but in the context of your previous version of this type of Euro storytelling game, Above and Below. So yeah. I was wondering, so let's just kind of go back. What were you trying to accomplish with Above and Below, and do you feel like you did so?
Yeah, Above and Below, I actually designed the game without the stories first. And my goal with Above and Below is to make a game for, before I start a design, I always think about the audience. And, for Above and Below, I was trying to design this game for a wider audience. A game I thought like a family would enjoy. And after working on it for a while, the stories just they I don't know. One day I thought, this really needs more theme and it needs more stories, and that just kind of fell in, and it seemed to fit so well. So I think my goal with Above and Below was to obviously create like a family Euro type game, but that had that Tales of the Arabian Nights story element to it, because I was influenced by that game. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of a weird mashup. I had never seen anything like that before. But my goal is still to keep it kind of on the lighter end of the spectrum, and I think I'm happy with it. It's definitely our best-selling game. So.
Oh wow! I didn't know that.
When you just described what your target was for designing Above and Below, I'm thinking, man, Ryan, you hit it. Like that, because what you just described is exactly how Above and Below was received.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, that's good to hear.
Yeah, we didn't know that was your high selling game, because I guess listening to BGG, listening to the alpha gamers, you get a little bit of a sense that so bringing Near and Far, there was a little bit of a sense that Near and Far was kind of this is above and below, but with some of the creases ironed out a little bit. So this is just some of the stuff that, like, okay, there was some things that happening above and below. Near and Far did different things, and it was kind of in response to some of the other stuff that maybe people had difficulty with in above and below. So is that a narrative you're aware of, or do you agree with that narrative?
Sure. I mean, I've spent lots of time, listening to people talk about the game and reading comments and things like that. And so, yeah, Near and Far definitely is a bit of a response to some of that. People wanted more story. They wanted reaction paragraphs. They wanted more going on in the game. And so that's definitely why some things changed in Near and Far. But I will say this: I don't know if Near and Far will ever catch up to Above and Below. I do hear people say, "Oh, I read the complaints and stuff about Above and Below," but I've never designed a game that seemed to reach so many people. Like, so many people like it, even if the hardcore gamers don't really like the game. It seems like it really connects with people that don't even like games.
People that don't visit BGG and get involved in Twitter wars and
right,
families and children and all that kind of thing.
Well, right. I think that's going to be so key as a publisher, is you obviously want to have your mark, and you have it with Red Raven Games, no doubt. Great job there. But you want to have, somewhat of a diverse catalog. And so if Above and Below is serving that, we can't call it quite mass market crowd, but that family-friendly crowd, whereas Near and Far could serve, a more gamer-type crowd, well, that's perfect. That's a diverse catalog right there.
Right. And even Near and Far is, it's not going to appeal to the people that like the super heavy Euro games either. But it has that, it still has a somewhat wide appeal, but it is more complex. So.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, let's get into it. Let's get into talking about Near and Far. So I wanted to start where a lot of people start, which is the theme and the story and the kind of the vibe that you're going for. You're going for a storytelling game, Tales of the Arabian Nights, but with Euro mechanisms as opposed to just like random dice rolls like in Tales of the Arabian Nights.
Right.
So just in terms of the theme and story, the word I hear a lot is whimsical. Like, you have this kind of, you read some of the stories and there's no combat. There's no there's combat, but there's no blood and guts. There's no, wild, crazy adventures. It's just kind of it's hard to describe. So maybe you can kind of talk us through what you're going for, if whimsical is an accurate kind of descriptor for it, and what were your influences?
Yeah, I do hear that word a lot, and when I designed the game, I wasn't really thinking that, but it seems like it does resonate in both games. But I have to say, part of that influence probably comes from Alf Siegert, who is one of the writers for Near and Far, and in fact the other writers, Mallory Lockett, my wife, and Brenna Asplund. And Brenna Asplund is actually a student of Alf, because Alf teaches at the local university. So we all kind of have the same, the same idea when we were making this setting. But Alf Siegert's games, he's a game designer, and his games are often described as whimsical as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like in the sense of, you're going through, I don't want to spoil the stories for anybody, but, a young boy walks into a town, and the town is full of mantis people. And the mantis wife and the mantis husband are carrying their little mantis baby across the street. Do you help them? What?
Right.
What did I just read?
Right. I've heard, I have heard people compare it to it's maybe like kind of a Wizard of Oz or Alice in Wonderland kind of a vibe. And that's kind of what we were going for. So.
Did you always have a goal? Maybe it's even with Above and Below. Certainly Above and Below, you mentioned the family element, but the stories are very captivating. They definitely have a heart to them, but like Jason was saying, they don't really turn the PG-13 corner either. You know, is that your influence? Is that the world that you always depicted, that it would be very open? Because I think that adds to that whimsical, that you never went to the blood and guts or, you know, all that PG-13-esque-ness.
Yeah, you know, it seems like it's a little more, you know, faithful to kind of what we're trying to do. You know, I guess it's basically part of it. It's good to think of it like a children's book that's like come to life. And when I say like a children's book, like, you know, like Alice in Wonderland.
Not like Thomas the Train, a little bit.
Yeah, no, yeah, like nobody's like, there's not like lots of blood and guts in Alice in Wonderland. But, you know, there are some stories in there that where you get to be bad. So I have heard some people say, oh, you know, this game lets you be evil. You know, I attacked this poor person that needed help. So
you definitely, so we can actually shift over to kind of theme integration into some of the mechanisms. So like good and evil, you represent that in the game where you have this reputation track. So you start at 0, and by virtuous deeds, you can arc yourself way up. And then if you steal or if you know, do different dastardly things, like if you duel underhandedly, you can knock yourself down. So just one thing. So like maybe talk a little bit about the mechanisms of the game and how you kind of approached it to bake all the theme that you do in there.
Yeah, so that reputation track is obviously a carryover from Above and Below, because we needed some kind of way to balance out, you know, negative consequences or negative choices. So it did make it in there, but you know, we tried a whole bunch of other things as we were making the game, and some of those other things didn't work, because at first I didn't want the reputation track. I wanted something a little more less black and white, and we tried a whole bunch of things and ended up with the reputation track in the end anyway.
It's like, all right, forget it. This thing worked good enough.
Yeah, it was just it was such an easy way to sort of balance out the reward system. Usually in these games, if you make a choice that's kind of like a selfish choice, then you usually get more coins or goods or things like physical property. So if you're getting more of that, then there has to be some kind of negative, you know, point consequence, and that was sort of the easiest way to go.
Okay, so then, so Ryan Lockett. I know you make a lot of different games, but for the most part, I think most of your games are these kind of not directly interactive Euro-ish games. I know that sounds like a lot of words. But you know, like I'm thinking of, what have I played? Islebound, Artifacts Incorporated, City of Iron. These games are very Euro-ish in feel, and they're not very like directly competitive where you're just fighting. You know, there's victory points and all that kind of stuff. So you've imported that into Above and Below and Near and Far. You know, which is, that's kind of what you do. However, I want to go to a review from No Pun Included. I don't know if you've seen this, where they said that they wish the game was a cooperative game, as opposed to a competitive game. That's one among many things they said. And, you know, cause you're competing, and yet, so competition and all of the rich storytelling seemed to kind of, you know, it didn't jibe for them. Like I think it evoked more of a cooperative feel. So did that come up for you as you were designing the game, or did you just like, you know what, this is what I do. I'm really great at this, and this is how it's going to come out? Yeah.
So I have seen that review, and I have heard people say that they wanted it to be a cooperative experience, because the storytelling definitely, it does. I agree that making a storytelling game, it seems to jive more with like a co-op experience. So this was really tough, because I'll tell you, making a competitive game with story elements is by far the most challenging design thing I've ever had to do.
And you two of them.
Yeah. Like making, it's really hard to make that competitive thing work with the story thing. So, you know, I see that, and I've heard people say that. What's interesting is like when we play it, like in our group, when I played it with a lot of groups, it was very competitive when we played the game. People would cut each other off. Somebody would go and get the trade route, so you couldn't get that, and everyone was like constantly keeping an eye on each other. And so I guess we played it as a very competitive experience. But I've heard other gamers, when they play it, they are so interested in the stories or the world or the setting that they don't pay as much attention to the competitive aspect. So I have seen that comment, and I can understand it. So
So did you ever think to go in that direction during the design and playtesting process as you're getting feedback, or was it always, okay, this is the game and I'm just gonna do the best that I can?
No, I always wanted it to be a competitive game, because that's what's sort of different about Above and Below and Near and Far. Like, I can't think of many other games that are story games that are also competitive games that are like a Euro style game. So I think that's what sort of sets these two games apart. Even though it was a difficult game to design, so no, I mean that was. And I wasn't even thinking about co-op, honestly, until recently.
So you rose to the challenge, sir.
Yeah, I think I like competitive games more than co-op games, although these last few years I've gotten more interested in co-op games.
Okay, so Brandt, you did a whole campaign, right, with your wife?
Yep.
And what'd you think? I mean, you played the full one?
Yep.
With all the maps?
No, we did the character one.
Oh, so the three characters. Okay.
Yep.
So how did that feel? Did it feel a little fun, or was it just amazing you didn't even think about it?
No, amazing. I didn't think about it.
Okay.
I can, again, like people are saying, I can see the want for co-op because of the investment in all those things. But I found for the most part, and actually I think there was a great job in there where it said, hey, use these two characters for a 2-player one, because the stories were longer for those two characters, and I don't remember their exact names, but we used those two, and it was like I was as engrossed in my wife's character story as I was in my own story. Mm-hmm. So definitely, that piece of the Tales of the Arabian Nights where the story is driving what you're doing was there, because I was interested in both stories and how they resolve, not just my own. And did I get 72 points to my wife's 65? It was awesome because I wanted to win, but I didn't care.
Right.
I wanted to hear the stories is why I wanted to play through the campaign. So
cool. And I mean, the Near and Far, so I guess we'll transition to a little bit of the expansion that is currently on Kickstarter, which is why we're releasing this episode a little bit early. We usually release on a Friday, but that's the last day of the Kickstarter. That does nobody no good. So we're releasing a little bit earlier. So, as you're getting into Amber Mines, you were saying was a smaller expansion, but you still felt like it was worth bringing out there because I guess you were getting good feedback, or maybe talk a little bit about, sell us on the game in a way.
Yeah. So I was really excited, right when Near and Far released, I had these ideas of how to expand the mine. That was the first idea I had. And, I forget where that came from. It was I think I was playing a video game, where you sort of explore a dungeon and there are randomly generated rooms. And I thought, you could do that with the mine. Mm-hmm. It's like a little mini adventure that you go on each turn. So the way it works is there's a whole deck of mine cards. And when you go to the mine, you don't just place a tent there. You start drawing cards and you sort of build the mine as you go. So you add a new card and it's a new room. And it's cool because it's kind of a pressure luck thing. And you might want to stop and build a camp somewhere to get the goods there. But if you keep going, you might get a little better reward. So... the whole game stemmed from that idea. And then also, obviously, it's interesting because once a game comes out, thousands of more people play it, right?
Yeah.
So you see things and you hear things that it doesn't matter how much we play tested it and sent it out to so many people in so many groups. New things are going to come up and I'm going to think of new things, I'm going to have new ideas. So, we also, we added the spell cards for the Mystic's Hut, and I know the Mystic's Hut hardly ever gets used in the game, so that was something I was excited about.
Mm-hmm. And there is a co-op mode in the new game, isn't there?
Yes, there is a co-op mode, and
Was that
honestly,
you, or did somebody step in and say, "Okay, I got this"?
No, I designed it, and
Awesome.
I actually didn't think that there was a way to make the game a co-op game, like, for a long time, even though people asked for it, and I thought about it, and I just couldn't think of how to make it work, and then I had this idea, and I mean, to be honest, part of it was requests from backers. One thing that is kind of different about when we run a Kickstarter, when we launch the Kickstarter, the game is not like done. Some other companies, like, when they launch the Kickstarter, the game is basically already at the printer. But I like to leave it. Usually, I like to leave it open for some backer feedback, and I will change the game before it's printed based on what people say they want. And there was a big clamor for co-op, and I took some of those ideas I'd thought about and developed them further, and it actually works really well. I really enjoy the co-op mode now that it's part of the game.
So. That is there. And funny you mentioned, well, I mentioned it, but co-op and solo, I was able to play near and far. So I played with Shard Light. What's that Shard man called?
Oh, yeah, Shardling.
Shardling, that's it. That's my dude.
Yeah.
Yeah. I played solo with him against a fan-made Automa. His name is Themis Dakanalis. Wanted to give him a little bit of a pub because he's done a couple of fan-made Automas, and it's amazing. It totally unlocked the game for me as somebody who had a little bit of issue getting a group together for it. Wanted to give a little bit of pub on that. So I really thank you for listening to the backers and providing a different way in to the game. I can only imagine all it does is open it up to new people, and you found a way to do it while kind of still being happy with it, which is great.
Yeah, I'm excited, and I have seen the fan made single player variant, and it's very clever, and I would totally direct anybody who wanted like a more in-depth single player experience to use it. Yeah, because I mean, I guess we could talk about the differences between the two.
Sure.
So let's see. Have you played the? So we made it available, the official co-op mode on the Kickstarter. I don't know if you've
played it yet.
Looked at it or not. So the difference is with the I'm sorry, I forget it's the Automa by
T.
is it
Dakanalis.
Themis?
I think.
Oh, T.
Yeah. So we'll just call it the Automa. That's his baby.
Okay, yeah. It's really clever because it simulates another player really well, right? I mean, is that how you felt when you played it?
It was like another bad player.
Right. It's like a player that gets in your way.
Sometimes he gets in your way. Sometimes he doesn't. So there is a priority system where.
Oh, yeah.
So the way it works is that you'll flip a card and then it'll say it'll change between. So sometimes it'll take actions in the town and it'll provoke duels if it's lucky. So and then the second part it'll build a tent somewhere in the Adventureland, and sometimes like it prioritizes building them on the trade spaces. So if you're going for trade spaces, then that's a problem. But if if you're not going for trade spaces, you're going for another strategy, you can kind of avoid it. So it's not perfect. So it's kind of a dumb player in a sense, but it's still like because there are some maps where you have no choice. Like you have to go through the trade routes. Like it matches up the stories and the trade routes. So like I played a map where all the stories were on the trade routes, and the stupid Automa kept on ninjaing me. I can't get stories. I need stories to contribute. So it kind of matched up that way. So yeah, I mean, it's not like it's a dumb player. I say that with a quotes, but at the very least, it did give me a challenge. So it wasn't like perfect, but it definitely opened the game up. So I have to give it that.
Oh, that's cool. That's great. Yeah. So my goal when I created the co-op was to make it as sort of easy as possible to implement it. And I needed it to work with like all player counts. So basically, you get this board, and every turn you'll move a token. Well, every round you'll move a token along the board, And at some places on the board, you'll have to draw a threat or a minion card, it's called. And the minion goes to town and it like gets in your way and it can cause problems if you don't take care of it. And then as the track moves along, like there's a point value. Once somebody ends the game, which is just the normal way you end the game, you count up everyone's points, and the point you look at the point value on the track of whatever space you're on, and then you times that by the number of players, and you have to match that point value or be higher. So that's sort of like, so that's kind of like a fight against the points is kind of, because the whole game is balanced around victory points, right? So it's, you can't really like redesign the whole thing to work like Pandemic, but that's kind of the way that works. But there are some things like you have to work together to take out those minions, because each minion card on town, you can't just go there and defeat it once. It needs to be defeated twice. So it definitely helps if like two players go after the same minion. Mm-hmm. And then you can trade resources with each other, and you can, if you're on the same space, you might give each other like gold. Oh, it's like, oh, I need that gem for this card. Oh, okay, and so that's kind of fun.
So you said it was a small expansion, but you seem to include a lot. Like, it's not just more cards. Like, that would have been easy, right? Yeah. But there's a whole new Mystic's Hut, there's a whole new mine, and there's this new mode. I mean, they're getting a lot. Yeah, and honestly, because the campaign's done so well, we've just added more and more and more, right? So the box is pretty stuffed full at this point.
Well, that's what gamers like.
That's right.
Yeah.
We measure our fun in tonnage.
I've got new shelves going up next to me right here where we're doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's all the questions I got about Near and Far. Anything else that you wanted to throw in there?
I do. I think there's one thing that we didn't hit on. So, Ryan, what was the inspiration for the map book? Because that's definitely a very unique element to Near and Far.
Yeah, I'm really excited, proud of that part of the game. I designed the whole game around it, basically. It actually was in a previous prototype that I made. It was going to be it was like a little miniature train game, and the game had a little book, and, you could play on different maps. And the train game, after a while, I just kind of got bored with the train game, but I really liked the...
And went to a highly thematic game.
The map idea, yeah. So the idea came from, we were playing Above and Below, and I was looking at the book. It was laid out on the table with the spiral, and there were, like, somebody had put some tokens on the book, and like the storybook, and I was like, oh, that could be the board, and I'm like, that could be like 10 boards, 11 boards or whatever.
See, this is an insight into the mind of Red Raven Games right here. Like, oh, tokens on a spiral ring book. Clearly, that's an entire game. That's going to be a great game.
Is that how people design? They put tokens on stuff, and this is easy.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, that's so unique. I definitely have to put that in a game. And for years, I've always felt like so limited by paper, by area, basically, because in a normal game, like, you can only have one board because it just costs too much money to, go crazy and have all this stuff. So
nice. Yeah. The other thing there too is that is it courage? Is that the hearts? Are they called courage?
Oh, I think
we spend to travel.
Yeah, I think we've just been calling them hearts.
Hearts.
I think I'm trying to think. Well, it's funny because I've written a few rule books since that, so I'm trying to remember what we call it. Maybe it was.
But anyway, the balance of those is really neat because you go out adventuring, and at some point you realize I need to return to town, and that's what makes it, instead of being one single adventure, it almost has an arc to it. Like, even a small game that's with the two of us, it was usually taking us about 45 minutes. But there's this little arc of like, oh, I got to go on the adventure west, and then go back to town, and then go east, and then I've got to go further west. Yeah. So what made you put those hearts, or I'm going to call them courage?
Yeah, courage. Well, it was hard to get that arc right. What do they call that? The narrative arc in the game. Mm-hmm. And to get players to sort of how do you make the game? Well, the whole game was balanced around like traditional like role playing games, like computer role playing games. I played a lot of Final Fantasy as a kid, and the way that game works is like you leave town, you go out, and you level up, and then at a certain point you need to go back to town because you got to spend your money and you got to rest or whatever. And that's actually, I played a lot of Diablo growing up, and that was the same thing. You got to make sure that going back to town over and over again. So that was sort of how we did that.
Nothing worse than finding out you don't have your town portal in your backpack.
Right. Yeah.
You got to walk all the way back.
It's funny because in the game there's a town portal. You just go right back. I thought it would be tedious to have to trek back every time. Yep. I saw somebody say that they made their own variants in the game where they have to travel back each time, and I thought, oh, that would be so tedious.
Keep working on that, sir. What it reminded me of, speaking of that whimsical sense, it reminded me of like The Hobbit before anything happened, where like, they're in the town and then they would go as far as Bree, and Bree was like a giant adventure.
Right.
And then they would walk back. It just felt really like warm. Like it felt really like, okay, I'm going to take a stroll and I'm going to have a little adventure. I'm going to meet my mantis people, or I'm going to meet my, I'm going to help a little old lady across the street or mug her or something, whatever you can do. And then I'm going to go back to town. So like the way you wrapped it up, like, you managed to get the mechanical sense of adventuring, going back, managing those hearts, and also wrap a great theme around it. Like, obviously, Brandt and I love the game. I rated the game a 9 out of 10, which is like wow. And then, Brandt just, couldn't stop playing. So we're big fans of the game. Sorry if we've seemed a little bit fawning, but
no, that's really, that's really encouraging to hear.
Yeah. So, no, this has been great. I think that I don't want to take up too much of your time. You're, it's getting a little late for you over there. And, we just wanted to, definitely appreciate you making the time to come on.
Well, I really appreciate that. Yeah, I wanted to say real quick, The Hobbit is actually, it's been my favorite book for years. So like everything I make, I feel like is influenced in some way by The Hobbit. And although it's probably not as obvious in everything, but definitely an influence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the art style is so kind of, pastoral and, like not sedate, because I don't want to say you fall asleep playing your games, but serene, I guess, is a better word for it. And you have a lot, you have a lot going. And so maybe the Kickstarter is wrapping up, but are there any other games down the pipe that are coming that we should look out for?
Yeah, I'm actually working on, well, it seems like a whole bunch of games right now. There's a game by Alf Siegert that's called Haven, and we've been working on it for a long time, and I expect that'll be out next year. And I think, Empires of the Void 2 will be out early next year.
Nice.
That's a follow-up to my first game that I published.
That was 8 Minutes. Was that 8 Minute Empire?
No, actually, the first game I made was Empires of the Void.
Okay.
It was
I got to do my Ryan Lockett homework.
Yeah, no, it's weird because it's long out of print. It's really hard to find. We didn't print that many, but it's a 4X or 3X space conquest game. It's like totally different than Above and Below.
Yeah, Ryan, I think that's the one where people are going to see the full a fuller spectrum. I'll say that. Right.
Yeah.
Because you were saying a lot of like Above and Below and Near and Far obviously are one's an iteration of the other, but Empires of the Void is you get away from that Euro.
Yeah, it's not a Euro game at all. But the new one, it definitely has that mix. It's a hybrid game. It like has a little Euro mechanics, but you can attack people, and anyway.
Cool. All right, so that is everything from us. I would like to thank Brian for taking the time. I'd also like to thank the Brandt.
Woo!
Please hit him up on the Portal Gaming podcast whenever you get a chance to go into your podcast feed. So that's going to do it for Every Night is Game Night. Please hit us up on the Twitter. We are ENGN_podcast. You can find us on Facebook at BoardGamersAnonymous.com, our sister podcast site. Please go to iTunes, rate and review 5 stars or less, but 5 stars, please. just, you can find us anywhere. We like to give you these interviews. We want to give, you're going to give you guys what you want. So I think Ryan Lockett is exactly what the people want at this point. So without further, until next time, grab a solo game off the shelf and make every night a game night.